Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the NetrunnerQuest. We're here today without Code Marvelous, our normal host. So you just have us. So we are Laura.
Hello, I'm Thomas Confess.
Alan or Raytan.
And I'm Kevin, or Kevin Tame.
Wait, who are you? You're new.
I'm new.
We are very excited to have Kevin on. He's going to take the role of a guest expert, kind of sharing a topic with us today, and then in the future he's going to join us as a regular panelist.
Woohoo! I love, just a note, I love NetrunnerQuest. It was one of my favorite podcasts for Netrunner content. And so I might have been the biggest fan, maybe. I don't know. And so when you guys were talking about reviving this and invited me, I was super stoked. So thank you very much.
Good. Yeah, we're excited.
Yeah, we are. It's really great to that people engage in it, and thank you for keeping on us to make it again. And thank you for joining us. It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we did this 2 weeks ago, and I think Thomas is the only one who was in that episode.
Yes.
So do you want to give a real quick recap of last week and kind of what has happened since then?
So in the last episode we were talking about pet IDs, and it was Dan, Sanjay, and I, and we were spending the time talking about what a pet ID looks like and the pluses to it and the downsides to it, and it was entertaining. I think Dan was coming very much down on it's time to move away from your pet IDs, while Sanjay tried to enable me. So thank you, Sanjay.
And then you played Adam after all.
And then I played Adam after all, and I'm going to we'll talk more about that next time, which I'm not going to talk too much anyway. Yeah, I think Dan was right. I think it might be time to move away from a pet ID. So, yeah, just always be thinking about whether or not the deck choices you're making are good ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I joined the show last season. I don't know, do we call them seasons? I don't know, whatever it was, last
we
year.
Have enough episodes for a season?
Well, I was in 2 episodes, and then we didn't do any for a year, so I thought I had killed the podcast, but...
Wow.
But yeah, I had a fun Netrunner year last year. I got 3rd place in 2 regionals, so that was exciting. And then I had to take several months off because I had a baby in October instead of going to Worlds.
She's a beautiful baby, though.
Yeah. Doesn't want to sleep right now, but that's okay. And I don't know, are we talking about our goals and stuff? Is that a thing we still do?
That's not really a thing we're doing right now.
Not right now? Okay. Okay, so Alan, do you want to fill in on what you've been up to?
I mean, I basically haven't been playing Netrunner, and I got convinced to kind of, get stuff together and come to the charity tournament, and then I didn't drop a game during the Swiss, so I feel like I'm throwing a wrench into all the dedicated practice stuff. But we'll talk about that later. But part of it I think is I didn't stop with Netrunner content. I just stopped actually getting games in, and we'll maybe try and talk about that a little bit more later.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Kevin, do you want to?
Yeah. Sorry.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you've been up to.
Okay, so hello everybody. I'm Kevin Tame. I am the creator of the Hacktivist channel, so I play and reflect on my Netrunner, games. Also do various other things, streaming, in real life games and tournaments and whatnot. I'm Kevin Tame everywhere on the internet. So when I started, playing Netrunner, I didn't have an alias or a handle, so it was just Kevin Tame. So I'm pretty easy to find everywhere. I'm the 211th best Netrunner player in the world. That's what I like to say. Meaning I got 211th place at Worlds.
Yep.
So
I'm there with you, buddy.
Yep. I wrote an article, so what kind of like spawned all of this, creating content and whatnot was, I did really bad. I felt really bad about myself, and then I wrote this article, and I actually had a lot of people reach out to me and say, "Oh, this is great! Like, thanks for sharing this. Like, I feel like sometimes I don't get better, blah blah blah." I was also talking to you guys know Ajar Raja, and he has his article where he like submarined up to 16th place, and so that kind of inspired me with this idea of like, hey, and one thing he mentioned in his article is, oh, I got this coach, and that's what really helped me. And I was like, huh, why couldn't I get a coach? And so long story short, I got a coach and whatnot, and yeah, I started and then I was getting coached by Jonas, and I was like, you know what, like this is probably useful to other people, and that's why the Hacktivist channel kind of came about.
Oh, neat.
You got a pretty solid coach there.
Yeah, he's great. Like he was also like kind of, so I mean, I love Jonas dearly, but he was also kind of playing two worlds in his prep for Worlds. Like we had this other kind of group, but then he had the comrades group, so which was like super top secret, if you will. So like him and I were playing in person a bit leading up to Worlds, so it kind of was just like a natural fit. He's my good friend. So some of my goals, like my goals in general, obviously I want to win tournaments, don't get me wrong, but I've talked to Laurel about this. We're probably more of a IE spike, like we want to play the best decks and we want to win. But my goal is usually to make the cut in most tournaments, like at a store championship. I pretty much did that at all the store champs that I went to this year, so that felt really good.
Nice.
Regionals, all that stuff. Making the cut is usually my goal. Winning is also kind of a goal that I don't really say out loud, but I feel like sometimes.
I think if you're here, you should want to win. I mean,
Yeah.
This is about like, okay, so we're trying to get better, and there is the easy definition of better is I win 100% of all my games, but no, it's not. There's nothing to be ashamed of in wanting to win.
Yeah.
I
We just went to. Oh, go ahead.
I think what it comes down to is that in Netrunner, like if I make the cut, that's usually from solid play, but oftentimes in the cut, random things happen. I feel like sometimes you get a bad matchup. There's a little bit more luck that kind of comes into play in the cut. Obviously, solid play can get you all the way through, I think, but making the cut is usually a good determining factor that I played well all of Swiss.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I had that feeling, during the charity tournament where went, undefeated during Swiss, won my first game of the cut as Titan, and then hit 2 CTMs in a row with smoke, and just
that
doesn't go anywhere for me.
Was it CTM or was it the prison NEH that you hit?
It may have been the NEH. I just remember.
At least one of them was the prison NEH. I remember.
I remember economic warfare
like CTM, but...
and hard hitting news and not having money. That about sums it up. I'm not sure which yellow ID it was at that point.
I love that deck. It makes my deck so much better. But
and then like the final thing about me, just like in the introduction. Sorry to go back to that, but I'm planning on going to Worlds this year, regionals, local GNKs, and then I'm still tossing up the idea of Gen Con. My brother lives there, so I'd be able to stay with him. But my wife she says I can only have a certain amount of long distance travel for Netrunner. So
that seems unreasonable.
It was interesting. I sent her that Billions video that came out, and her message back to me, I don't even think she watched the video. She just saw that it said Billions, and she says, if you can make millions of dollars playing Netrunner, you can play every day from 9 to 5.
9 to 5, yes.
Yes, 9 to 5.
You don't play every day from 9 to 5?
And I was like, okay, that sounds great.
Excellent.
I don't think anyone's making much money playing Netrunner, unfortunately. Unlike what it seemed in that video.
Do you want access?
We're gonna make the I modeled for this a thing. I'm determined.
I played Sanjay an hour ago, and right before I accessed Adonis, he said, I modeled for this. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, you guys know.
I give it another few days before you know.
I don't think it's gonna wear off. Me and so I was playing at Savage Mill in our local place here, and Charles. I don't know if you guys know Charles. System Outage. He also has a channel, but he's like the king of like voices and like quotes and stuff. So we were playing the whole time, just giggling like as we were like quoting that Billions episode.
Yeah. I played the Maker's Eye.
Yeah.
I think my favorite thing about that is like the guy looks like taken aback that, oh my goodness, a run on R&D with the Maker's Eye, and my toll booth got broken. Oh my!
It's like I had everything rezzed, and she just had the money to bring. They just had money to bring. Sorry.
Yeah. The breakers were already out and everything. There weren't any surprises.
I know it. Like we've had this conversation where I love that we're getting exposure, but it makes me cringe because it's so close to accurate. But
right, the numbers are all right. We've reached uncanny valley of our game playing.
Exactly.
It's almost right.
It's the sexual tension that really throws it off.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is kind of weird.
Yeah,
for
Sanjay is choosing to believe that this is a romantic comedy show because he's never seen it. So.
Yeah, I mean, I regularly play Netrunner with my husband, and we have never had a game like that.
So.
Oh man.
So let's
move on from there.
Dan suggesting that he modeled for Mammon.
Yes.
Isn't that the Buddha one or something like
Yes,
that?
it
Like
is.
Yeah. The greed.
Yep.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So, Kevin, we wanted to have you on, one, because you're a really good Netrunner, and two, because you're a really good friend of the show, and three, because you write excellent articles and talk about deliberate practice. And we thought that would be a good topic to talk about.
Cool. Yep. And I'm excited to talk about it. So let me just kind of like kick in here. Just a little bit of context too was it was actually kind of inspired a little bit from the NetrunnerQuest podcast. I listened to, it was Noah McKee's episode, and he was talking about, how he built this kind of system for improvement. And what had happened is I had read like a few years ago this book called Talent is Overrated, and I read it and I was like, oh my gosh, like this like ties directly to what he is saying. And it goes into, it compares like Tiger Woods and all these people and like how they go through the process, and all these professional athletes, and like they go through the process of deliberately practicing to improve. And I was like, this can totally be applied to Netrunner. And I think like what's a really good definition, which I wrote in the article, and I have it written right here, so I'm going to read it for you. It says, deliberate practice refers to a type of practice that is purposeful and systematic. Regular practice usually is mindless repetition of some activity. Maybe that's not like a perfect definition of deliberate practice, but I think it sums it up pretty well, that like you are putting some sort of purpose, or you're putting some sort of approach into your practice that instead of just like grinding out games. Don't get me wrong, I think lots of repetition and practice doing the same thing over and over is important, but it's not deliberate practice. And so once I had kind of connected those dots, I started trying to figure out like what is like my way of deliberate practicing. And so I wrote that article, and there's some insights, and we can go through those and share those if you guys want.
Yeah, I was really excited when I read your article. It kind of hit on kind of what I had been thinking about, or I guess maybe it brought up some things I hadn't thought about, because I would play a lot of games, like leading up to regionals last year, I was playing a lot of games, but it wasn't until just maybe a week or so before that I started just in a very simple spreadsheet recording my games, just like the ID and who I was up against and whether I won or lost, and notes. And even just that tiny bit of recording information like made a huge difference in how I thought about my games and kind of learned from them. So yeah, please share kind of some of the points you made. And
Yeah, so just a caveat here as well is I do not deliberate practice all the time. That is like this is like not it's hard to do and it's difficult and it takes work. So sometimes I just want to play Netrunner just to have fun, right? And so I just do that instead, right?
What? Netrunner is fun?
Like even when I'm doing it, it's pretty fun, but sometimes it can be a little arduous, right? If you are like really trying to focus on something and improve. So another kind of high level concept, which I illustrate in the article, is this idea of the zones of how you are when you are playing or practicing, and it's a spectrum. It's the panic zone, the comfort zone, and the learning zone. And the panic zone, the best way like I describe this is you have like you have no skill or ability when you're in that zone. So to me, the analogy I always give is like it's me flying an airplane, right? Like I have no experience. Like I would be in utter panic, right? I don't have that skill. The comfort zone is a lot of times I play games on my phone or whatever, and I get into this zone where it's just like it's mindless. I play Agricola, is the one I referenced in the article. The other one I play a lot now is Clash Royale. And I'm not actually actively trying to get better at that one and moving up the ladder. What I'm really doing is just opening it up a few times a day and just like playing a game. And I don't think about anything when I'm doing it. That is like a perfect example where I'm in the comfort zone. And you're not really improving at that point. The learning zone is like kind of where the magic happens. And what you do in the learning zone is it's where you're not quite comfortable. You're out of your comfort zone, but you're not panicking either, right? It's like right there in the middle, and you are trying to navigate like pushing yourself for improvement, while at the same time not pushing yourself so hard that like you're unable to do it, if that makes any sense. And that's where like all the learning really happens.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Kind of how do you see that applied to Netrunner? Like, do you have examples of like kind of playing Netrunner in the panic zone? What that looks like?
I don't as much anymore because it's when you're early on, like you can be in the panic zone, I think.
Alan?
I have a really good one of right in the middle, which Laura might remember from this past weekend. We had a moment where, there's clearly an agenda inside a remote behind two pieces of ice. One of them's a news hound. I have no breakers, and there's a current. And I go, well, I know that's an agenda. I have no way of getting in there. I'm stuck. What am I doing? And I stop and I pause and I go, okay, R&D's open. So my only way to not lose this right here, right now, is get rid of the current. So I ran, found the degree mill right off the top, and all of a sudden
one agenda left in the entire deck.
No, there was one more degree mill for me to find after that on the turn.
Right,
after
yeah, like a turn later.
Right. Yeah. So I grabbed that one. So there's now no longer a current. I have the link to make it through the data hound without it ending up with the tag. I go back through and I get the SSL, I think it was. And yeah, there was one more degree mill left in the deck for it to vomit up. After that, when you had one more in hand on top of that, you saw literally all 6 of your agendas in that entire deck?
Yeah, I saw all 6 in the top third of my deck. Yeah, that was rough to go from I'm on 6 points and have the last agenda install advance, and he can't get it. And you were on 0 points.
I was on 0 points.
Oh,
yeah.
I lost that game.
and
so I had
it sounds
another.
Like you moved from panic into learning very quickly.
Right.
Yeah.
Actually, I had 2 different 6-0 games that I 6-0 against games that I managed to turn into wins in that tournament. And it really was like, step back, what can I do to try and fix this?
Yeah. So I think you bring up like a really good point. And I want to talk about that in a little bit later, this whole idea of micro level versus macro level analysis. So I'm going to pause that for a second.
Sure.
But the way I think about like the panic zone, the comfort zone, and the learning zone is it's like a state of like being at a time, right? Like, so the panic zone, the way I look at it is with Netrunner, I'm never in the panic zone now because I know the game really well, right? When I first was learning, And I referenced this in my article about playing like Brandon Hawk, and he had just come back from Worlds and was like first in Swiss, and I was totally out of my element, right? Like I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know the cards. It was my first store championship, and it was my first tournament ever. I was definitely in the panic zone right then, right? And I floundered. Comfort zone is like I played a lot of CI moons like leading up to Worlds, and there were times where like I just go through the motions and the game just like happens, right? And I'm not really trying to improve, I'm just doing it. The learning zone is where I get a friend and I say, hey, I really struggle playing CI moons with this particular matchup. Can like let's, and what we'll do sometimes even is I'm going to stack our hands a certain way, right? Here is you're going to start off with like the perfect starting hand, and I'm going to start off with like a subpar starting hand. And we go and we maybe play only like a few turns to see what happens. That is like, it's really hard, but like it's still like doable, if that makes sense. That is like where the learning happens, because then I go, oh, if I do this, then I can kind of recover from this.
Yeah.
That's the learning zone to me.
It's funny you talk about CI moons, because I feel like when I'm up against CI moons is when I am in the panic zone.
Yeah, exactly.
All of the games that I lost at regionals last year in the cut and at both regionals were, I think it was, at the time it was ETF moons, not CI moons, but
Yeah, it was the Moonanite build.
yeah,
Similar
I
to
just
that,
would
yeah.
sit down across from that deck and like felt like I had no idea what I was doing. It was like I didn't know how to play Netrunner at all, and I would just do things until I lost. Like, so yeah, I think I've gotten past that point with moon stacks, but yeah, so that's kind of what it made me think of.
So let's kind of move on here, if you guys don't mind. Like,
Please.
so that is kind of the zones, and in my article, what I wrote about was like the insights that I had, and they're all kind of like focusing or helping you to get in the learning zone. Since then, I've thought of other things and other kind of ways to do deliberate practice, and I'll share those after I go through like the ones I already shared in the article, but I'll just kind of go through those real quick. So do you need something else, Thomas? Okay. So the first thing I did was I started recording my games. And this was kind of inspired from, actually was inspired from Clash Royale, to be honest. It's like, there's ability to watch all of your games in those apps and stuff like that. And so I'd go back and I'd watch them. I'd be like, oh, that's really handy. I see where I made that mistake. And going back, and what I actually do is I speed them up to like 2x, 3x sometimes. So you can watch the game quickly, and then I'll pause and be like, oh, I made a mistake there, or I didn't make a mistake there. This has evolved where I now publish them to my Hacktivist channel and I record myself talking about my plays. But before, it was just me recording them. The other piece to the recording is I use the parsing tool that Nathan had originally created and then I improved upon. And because right when I heard it on NetrunnerQuest, I said, hey, send me that. That's awesome. And then I took like a few weeks improving it and making it a little better. I actually kind of think that's a bit of a gimmick, to be honest. It's like a useful tool, but I don't use it all the time. It's mostly good at helping you understand your deck. And it's good when I'm really, really trying to practice a specific deck. Like I used it a lot leading up to Worlds and it was helpful then, but I don't think it's as useful like all the time.
Well, it gives you a lot of information, but not all of it. It's kind of hard to apply some of that information that it gives you.
Exactly. The most useful thing it does, I think, is when things are out of the ordinary, it sometimes calls that out. But a lot of times I notice that when I watch the video in replay. So for example, if I'm clicking for credits a lot, that's a problem. Most decks I want to operate with having my cards be really efficient and do all that work for me, right? And so if I'm clicking for credits or if I'm clicking for draw a lot, usually that's something's going wrong. And I need to, and then that can sometimes guide me if I look at the video, like what was going on here? Why was I doing that so much? The other thing I added to the most recent one is I added runs and where I ran. Certain decks as the runner, it's really interesting to see where you ran a lot. So you can be like, oh, I need to have on average like 4 to 5 accesses on HQ or 4 to 5 accesses on R&D. That was actually a really nice insight, and sometimes that's helpful. Or you need to know I need to run remotes a lot, type of thing.
I still very definitely, just as some of the old episodes you might remember, I still have some trouble, hitting HQ enough times. So
yeah, and it's amazing. Like you'll look, and I looked at one deck and I was like, I hit R&D 7 or 8 times and I didn't win. And it's like sometimes in the moment you don't make the connection that all the agendas are in HQ.
Right.
So that was number 1, recording my games and just kind of capturing them is like the first insight. The second insight was reflecting on my play, and we kind of already have talked about that, is looking at like what has happened and why you made mistakes. It's really important to look specifically at the like there's usually a turning point in the game where you lost. And it's in the first few turns, like you either didn't have the tempo or you didn't maintain tempo or whatever, and identifying that is really important. Sometimes it's like a blunder at the end of the game, and knowing that you like don't make that blunder again is also good to recognize. So is reflection is like the key to all of this, is looking at it and saying, okay, this is where I made my mistake and this is why. And I can't do it the way that like Noah described, where he sits and like thinks about the game. It's much easier for me to look at the recording and see, oh, I made that mistake. I actually now have the benefit that like people chat me with my videos and there's like, oh, you should have done this. So it's like people now telling me my own mistakes, which is even better.
Yeah, I love that. I think one of my favorite things about Netrunner is to sit and chat, especially in-person games, after the game, and talk about, why did I win or why did I lose? What went right? What went wrong?
Yeah.
I feel like
exactly.
some people are nervous that you'll be offended if they're telling you why you lost, but please, I invite that.
Sometimes I feel like it could come like I'm coming off arrogant, saying like when I win and they did something wrong. But I do it anyways. Like I've been playing a lot of the Rogue Max deck, and a lot of people lose that deck because they don't know how to play it against it. Yeah. It's a really good deck, by the way. And the first thing I say is go fast, right? Like you went way too slow, because if they get set up, you're done. And so, yeah, I just tell people. So the next thing is getting a coach, and this was obviously inspired by Raja, who had wrote his article, and he had Dan D'Eugenio being his coach. And so I asked Jonas, I was like, hey, you want to be my coach? And he was like, sure. And it's been a great.
You make that sound so easy.
It was very easy.
See, I read that same article, and ever since have been thinking, oh, I wish I could get a coach, but like actually asking anybody is hard.
What's really interesting is when I first asked Jonas kind of said, really? Like, well, he said it like, he's like, you're a great player. Like I beat him, he beats me, right? We go back and forth. And I think my comment might have been back was like, and this is maybe a little arrogant, but I said, Michael Jordan needed a coach. I mean, but like the concept is true, right? Like even if you're the best player, like you still need a coach, because you can't see your mistakes, or it's hard to see your mistakes. And Jonas has been that for me. And he's also that, like when I'm playing tournaments and he's watching my matches, he'll be like, oh, like you should have done this thing because that, you made that mistake, and that basically sets you up for the rest of the game to be really difficult. That happened to me in the Store Champs that I mentioned in the article. I was playing against Jesse Vandover, and I had 4 credits, and he was playing CTM, and I had a way to deal with hard-hitting news because I was on Haley and I had misdirection. I should have ran and checked the remotes that were out, right? Because I had no risk of hitting Moonbad Virtual Tour. And so I should have ran and checked them all, and because he had snuck out an AR security. Because I had played him in Swiss and beat him, and he knew he had to kind of rush some of that stuff out on me before I got set up, because he wasn't going to be able to beat me otherwise, because I have all of the answers for his deck. Shadow Net and all that stuff. I was on the the Wilfie Haley, and him scoring that AR like made my game so hard, right? Like the entire game, I was having to deal with that stupid tag whenever I trashed anything, and if I had just gone and checked and stolen it, it would have been a totally different game. And that's where Jonas was like, he's like, I was ripping my hair out over there. Like, why is he missing this thing? And so I highly recommend getting a coach, even if it's just like coaching your friends. And I've, Jeff Struby, and I've invited lots of other people, Jesse, to be my coach. And I've kind of now have like a reoccurring coach all the time now. And I've asked a bunch of other people. I asked Kenny Deacons and Dean and several people who are going to eventually come on, but we haven't found the time to make it work. So,
nice.
Sorry, I'm talking a lot here. Do you guys have any other thoughts?
You have a lot of interesting things to say, Kevin.
Okay, so I'll keep going then if that's...
Yeah, well, we want to get through kind of the main points of your article, and then maybe we can discuss a little more or something. I don't know.
Cool. The next thing that I think is really important, that this happens more, I think, with newer players, is focusing on technical play versus deck building. And this is where I imagine like Sanjay and Dan might totally disagree with me. I don't know. I know they really like deck building and doing like creative things, and maybe that's the way they play Netrunner, which is totally fine. But it's a very difficult thing to deck build. And so I believe focusing on playing, like learning how to play the game technically, is better in the beginning if you want to get better. So
yeah, we had a bit about that. I forget who originally told me that. Was when how to get better at Netrunners was start with playing good decks.
Yeah, exactly. Play a good deck. So we actually have a pretty good in-person Netrunner community where I live, and in the Baltimore area and the DC area. And we have a lot of new players come and learn the game. And the first thing that's like my first recommendation is, here's a deck that is tried and true good right now. And the one that I think like is one of the best decks, and it's very consistent, is the Comrades Vow. Like little modifications to it, but it's pretty consistent. It has good matchups across the board, and you're going to have a good time playing Netrunner, I think. And focus on like getting really good at that deck and then playing it over and over. The other thing I do is I've created these videos about Comrades Vow, which I then share with them and say, hey, watch these videos and go and play this over and over. I think it makes a big difference.
Yeah, and I know everyone enjoys different things about Netrunner, so I think like Sanjay probably wouldn't disagree with what you're saying. He just enjoys playing wacky decks more than he wants to get good. And that's fine if that's, your thing.
Totally. And
not that he's not already good. He's a good player.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And sometimes the wackiness actually throws people off, to be honest. It throws me off really bad when if I like show up and I see across from someone and I'm like, okay, I know what's going on, I feel really good, right? It's when I don't know what's going on that makes the game a lot harder.
And suddenly there's 3 aura bars installed there.
Yeah,
and...
that was actually one of the things I was going to say earlier about the panic zone, is sometimes when a deck archetype shows up that you have no idea what you're seeing, it
exactly
can put you there.
Yeah, and that's definitely, that's on the like the the micro level, like when you're in the moment. But yeah, and then I've definitely felt that experience numerous times where I didn't know what was going on.
Oh yeah, Jua exists.
The worst is when you like actually know what's going on and you don't know how to deal with it.
Yeah, that's also
Yes.
I think having Sanjay in our local meta has made at least me better than I was about dealing with like wacky stuff, because honestly half the decks he plays against me, I have no idea what he's doing, but I just stay the course, keep doing what my deck does, and I don't know, not get thrown by it.
Cool. So moving forward, the next thing is that I recommended was playing online versus in person, doing them both equally. Playing online is really great because it's frictionless. You're able to get lots of games and just jam. But there is something to be said if you want to do well in tournaments about playing in person, because the day is really draining. It's really hard, and the amount of mini actions you have to take throughout the day are really draining on your brain, and you just don't have the capacity if you play on JNet all the time. Like just keeping track of your credits or keeping track of what your opponent's doing. I use on JNet all the time the log, right? Like I look back and I'll be like, what was that thing?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like
And, yeah.
There
and
was
you
a
don't get-
while where I never scrolled up in the log because I thought it was cheating, because in real life you're not allowed to like take notes or whatever. So I would just say like, I don't know. I thought you weren't allowed to.
I mean, it's a good way to practice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I felt that when we were at the tournament.
There's something about the rules.
Sorry, when
Yeah,
we
go ahead.
were at the tournament, I had done a team sponsorship install of 3 different cards, and at one point Ian says, "All right, I'm going to run and trash this one." I'm like, "Okay, well, which one is it?"
Whichever one's
Which one it was.
yeah, whichever one the one what was it? It was a
It's not important.
testing or whatever.
Yeah, he wanted to get rid of that specific card. It's like, okay, well, I was clear with where I put them, but trying to remember that sort of thing, it like JNet really makes that
Helps
easy
you.
for you. But
I think the thing about it though is, and I'm unsure about the rule of this, but I think there is like both players have to let the other players know of the board state. So in that case, I think like you're kind of obligated as a player to be like, oh yeah, this one was the one that I installed.
yeah,
I'm not
think this
exactly
was a
sure the
later
ruling on that.
turn.
Yeah. Well, even later down the road, like from what I understand, I think you're supposed to say like, oh, these are the things. And I might be totally misspeaking on that, but I do that anyways. So,
Yeah.
anyways, so yeah, focus like playing online is like really good and you should do it, is what I'm saying. But then you should also play in person because it's like just a really tiring thing. And then the final kind of insight is repeat, is just do it over and over and over again, the same thing that you're trying to improve on until you master it. And that in the nutshell was the article.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to go back real quick to what you said about playing in person. And it's just suddenly dawning on me that maybe that's part of the problem I've been having, because I've been making the cut pretty consistently in events that I attend, but then getting cut from the cut pretty quickly just because I am so mentally drained. I start playing really badly. I just don't have that stamina to, keep playing my best 10 hours into the event or whatever. So, maybe more in-person practice would help with that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's so to me, what it really comes down to is that you want to know how to do things efficiently so it doesn't tax your brain, like dealing with your credits and dealing with like if you know your deck really well, it's nice because you don't have to really think about it. The most draining thing for me, honestly, is it's something I can't really make more efficient, is following my opponent and what they're doing.
Yeah.
That's really taxing. And a lot of times in the cut, I like check out, like you're saying, and that's when I miss things. And then I go back and watch on like the stream or whatever it is and be like, dude, he totally cheated or blah, blah. But like, it wasn't his fault because I didn't catch it and like he didn't catch it or whatever. Right.
Yeah. Or I'll just not notice that they installed a card in their remote that turn or something, just because I don't have the energy anymore.
Or you'll go back and watch the stream and you'll realize that it was absolutely obvious that the corp was flooded.
Yep.
And somehow just you couldn't pick up on that at the time because you're just exhausted.
Yep, totally.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing that I, realized with playing in person versus online, I'd sleeved up the 419 deck that Dan made for the first time, and we sat down to play Friday before King of Subways, and we made it halfway through the first game and goes, I have never made you pay to not expose a card this game.
That's like me and Scorpios. Ugh.
Yeah, you just... That one's kind of easier to do in real life than it is to do online, because you're like, yeah, just get rid of that. But online, you have to go and you click and you do the thing.
Well, and it's like
people online forget it all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Dan suggested that, back when 7-point CI was a thing, he would always make people play it out because it was making them use the mental energy from, You know, if you were going to play that deck, you're going to have to burn every bit of mental energy every time you do that. Because,
It's so
you know,
funny.
Yeah,
Dan
'cause
just
they
said
might
that in
make
the
a mistake.
comments.
yeah,
I'm
that's
reading it.
I'm just reading out of the comments there. Yeah.
I was like, wow, this is strange.
Oh, I led with Dan was just said.
Mhm.
Cool. So I kind of wanted to go a little bit farther is since I wrote that article, I've thought about this topic a little bit more, and I've actually had a lot of discussions with other people because people have reached out and, you know, shared with me their thoughts and stuff. So I have a few more kind of insights that I wanted to share with you guys, if that's okay.
Please.
Yes, please.
So the next insight that I kind of discovered is, and this could go under the record your game section and reflect and the coaching all in one, is I like to share my games with your coach or trusted players and have them give you like honest feedback about like mistakes you made. Because you can look and see like where you made mistakes, but it's interesting to hear other perspectives of how you could have improved your play. That I find is really valuable if someone is willing and has the time. I find when because I can just able to share my like hack to this videos, right? And they're usually sped up to 2x or 3x. And then it's me reflecting myself. Then it's easy for people to say, hey, you made this mistake here. I think you should have done this. And so that's another insight that I found is like utilizing your recording and not just reflecting on your own, but sharing it with your key people. The other one is that I have an insight on is don't play all of the game if you're testing with a friend. If you're like in the process of like really deliberately practicing, like I mentioned this already about, you know, stacking your hand or your deck already in a way that kind of favors you, your starting hand. Sometimes just playing like 5 turns is okay. It's really hard to do. It's really hard to do because Netrunner has the tendency, you always feel like you can make it happen, right?
Yeah.
Like you always feel that way. You're just like, oh, I could totally make this happen. Like I can make this work. And that's why it's probably a wonderful game, but it's good to just sometimes just cut it and start over and try again. So that is another insight. And this is kind of goes into the same point here is doing like first 5 turn analysis. I think a lot of the game is determined in those first few turns. And being able to determine like what happened in those first few turns of why you lost tempo or why they were able to get away. And this was talked about in one of your guys' episode with Dan Dargenio, and he talks about the beatdown, like, and it's basically talking about being a control deck and a aggro deck. And it's like, who is like the beatdown in this situation? And so I played a game the other day, and this is like a good example of this. I was playing CTM. I was playing it on stream, and I was playing against 419. And I look at this match and I'm like, oh man, I don't know if I can win this match, right? So I am the beatdown. Like I am going to get beat here. So in the first few turns, I really have to make this count. And so what I did, I can't remember the exact plays, but I was jamming really fast, like a GFI, and then I was able to land like hard-hitting news and stuff like that when they weren't set up. And it put my opponent on their back foot the entire game. And I was able to end up winning that game. And that's a good example where I was able to quickly adjust my game plan and end up winning. So what I'm calling to is like understand the first 5 turns of your deck, and like based off of the matchups is really important. And so reflecting on that, I think is like really useful. The other thing here is that I want to highlight is micro level play versus macro level play, or micro level versus macro level analysis. And the way I think about this is from a macro level, macro meaning like the entire game, like what happened. So like stepping back and looking at the entire game and understanding the reason I lost that game was because I was behind with tempo the entire game. Like I was always on my back foot, right? That's like looking at it from like a macro level. The micro level, we have a tendency as human beings and as players to look at like the very simple, like tactical mistakes we made. Like, oh, I did this one little thing wrong, or I did this one little thing wrong. That's important. And like, that's how you improve like small little aspects of your play. But the real important piece is understanding the bigger picture, the macro level of the game. And that takes, I think, a lot more work. And that's where I think it's useful to have recording your videos and watching them in super speed, because then you can kind of see it happening in front of your eyes easier.
Do you have an example of like where you've seen like where the macro analysis has been helpful?
I mean, it goes back to that same example I just shared with the
Yeah.
419 versus CTM. It's the exact same case, right? Like if I watch that in quicker succession, I can see that like I was putting pressure on my opponent the entire time. There was probably key mistakes I made and key mistakes my opponent made, but I'm not looking at that. What I'm looking at is the bigger picture of I was aggressive early in the game. I was able to continually put stuff into a server that forced them to go through, that then they had to deal with C-source and hard-hitting news multiple times to be able to keep clearing out their like power taps, and because it was a power tap with like all of that stuff, right? Like it's basically anti-CTM.
Right.
Yeah, it's a nightmare.
Yeah, it's a nightmare. And so like I'm like I can't win this. So and then I do have one tech card which is all seeing eye against like heavy resources, but I have to land a C source, which is almost impossible once they have power taps and all that kind of stuff. So if I can continue to like pressure them over the long term, then I'm going to win that game. So just keep jamming and whatnot and have them on the back foot. So that's like the macro level analysis, right?
Right.
Then the technical is like, oh, I could have won one turn sooner because at the very end, I could have like C-sourced them, exchanged. And what the mistake I made was is I waited to draw into like hard-hitting news. And so it took me like a turn or so later to then hard-hitting news them and win. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like I don't tend to look at the big picture as much. Like in thinking back in recent games that I lost, I can pinpoint like the moment where I lost, but I haven't really analyzed what's an overall kind of principle from that and that matchup that I can apply to future times with that matchup.
It's a lot harder to do a generic analysis of like, oh, I shouldn't press an agenda in the opening quite as much when you're, playing against Woo, because they'll always have the right breaker at the right time. But, it's not always as easy to say, well, Sonny, has the extra pressured, from turtles or something like that, and you have to balance. Those are all like micro little things that you're looking at, and it's harder to say, well, when do I need to go fast overall?
Yeah, and I think it comes down like that. It's a Magic article, the whole thing about the beatdown.
Yeah.
Who's the beatdown?
Who's the beatdown?
Yeah, and like that sums up a lot of macro level analysis, right? Like, because most of Netrunner is a tempo game, right? Who can last? Like, if you're the control, like who has the most control, right? Like if you are a Sunny with power taps and all that stuff, you are the controller of the game. Right? If we let this go too long, everyone loses. Or like the corporation loses. Not everyone, the runner wins.
Everyone loses.
It feels like everyone loses when I'm the corp. And so I can't let that happen, right? So like that's where I think macro level analysis like really comes into play, is being able to look at the ID and quickly come to that conclusion. I have an example of this, one more, like in Store Championship, where I was playing against Jonas, and he was on CI, and I didn't know it was in the cut, and I didn't know what type of CI he was on. And so I was really like timid, like I wasn't like pushing, because I was like, is he trying to kill me, or what's going on, or is he like, what's going on here? And and that's like I think one of the real advantages of CI there for a long time was you didn't know what was going on for the first few turns, and by that point it was too late, right? And he got a scarcity down, and I was on Haley, and I couldn't do anything about it. And so when I look at that, I can look at the micro level and look at like the small little mistakes I made. But what really matters is the macro level. I didn't understand what he was doing soon enough, and I wasn't able to like start, increasing my tempo or whatever like that to be able to catch up, if that makes sense.
Although if you don't know what kind of deck someone is on, I'm not sure Like, how can
Yeah.
you apply that going forward? You just gotta,
You maybe need to run a little sooner, right? Like,
yeah, get more information.
Look
Yeah.
for opportunities to, safely get some more information. Sure, don't run the too advanced card with the piece of ice in front of it and an upgrade in it against CI, but if R&D is open, take a couple pokes.
mhm.
You
Yeah.
may or may not hit an agenda, but if you're holding a decent amount of money, decent number of cards, you can probably poke and try and see if you see a punitive off the top, or biotics or moons, or what have you.
Yeah, exactly. So the other insight I've had since doing this deliberate practice was this idea of micro level versus macro level analysis, and like being diligent and looking at the big picture versus like the small little mistakes you make, because we have a tendency to focus on the small little mistakes. And mind you, sometimes it's a series of small little mistakes is like your macro level problem. Like, oh, you had 10 micro level mistakes.
Yeah.
Your problem was you made too many mistakes.
Yeah.
But what's interesting, like just like another note here, is I've shared with like Jonas or other people, like, hey, what did I do wrong there? And they're like, you didn't do any, like it from a micro level, you didn't do anything wrong. You just weren't fast enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like technically you played everything correct. And then also there's that piece of like, you just had a bad draw and I had a better draw. Like that is like when you look back and analyze it, you can say, I actually didn't technically make any mistakes, but like I just wasn't quick enough because I didn't see such and such card. And that was really true with like violet level clearance, right? Who had violet level clearance first, like mattered a lot in those like CI decks.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes Titan just dumps an Atlas turn 1, Biotics an Atlas turn 2, and Audacity's an Atlas turn 3, and it's just okay. Well,
Yep. And then so here, let's move on to my final kind of insight. Is this one is not as like important, I think, but I think playing competitive versus like casual, if you really want to like improve your game, I find sometimes when I'm playing in casual, I can grind a lot of games in casual and there's a lot of people there, but sometimes it's just me going through the motions. I'm more in the comfort zone when I am in casual JNet versus being in competitive JNet.
Yeah.
And so I think that's just like an insight I've had. It's gonna tank your scores a little bit more. Like if you're really into that, like what's your winning percentage on JNet? And you're gonna lose a lot more games, but it's actually gonna be a better learning experience for you, because that's where you're gonna see, I think, a lot more top tier decks, if you will, or see like kind of like where the meta is. That's where and it's not always like where the meta is, to be honest, but I think you just get a stronger players there.
I do think casual has some good uses besides just being the I'm playing more fun, because you talk about not wanting to get too far into the comfort zone, but you also have these moments of you kind of need to get into at least a little bit towards the comfort zone with a deck, because you don't if you pick up a brand new deck and you go, well, I know what these cards do, I know how they're supposed to go together, but not really how to go about it. You have these, you can still learn in casual, even if you're not,
Oh yeah,
perfecting play at that point.
Yeah,
I usually start a deck in casual when it's my first time, like my first few times.
I have and I know it's mostly a hang up, but I don't want to take a deck into competitive until I know it's capable of playing in competitive, because I also don't want to waste the time of the other person. Because
I feel that too.
I think competitive is a lot of times it's people like me that are trying to get better, or are trying to practice for a tournament, and I don't want to bring a bad deck there. So I do spend a lot of time in casual first and then go to competitive. But I do try to go to competitive more now than I used to.
It's funny, like I actually don't have that problem at all. Like I don't think I've ever thought that. Mine is more along the lines of when I'm playing like a top tier deck and I'm like, I really like, to be honest, I like decks that like they might be considered NPE, right? Like I like to feel like I'm constantly winning, right? And I want to be like kind of like winning hard. And like, so for example, the Rogue Max deck I think has that type of feeling where it's inevitable, and like I can just like access your entire R&D, and so that's why sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna play this in competitive because I feel bad I'm playing this in casual.
Yeah, that's also fair. If it's a deck that you think the other person isn't going to like, play it in competitive.
Yeah, totally. Those were all of my kind of new insights since writing the article. Hopefully those were helpful for you guys, and
Yeah.
yeah.
I think they definitely were, at least to me. It always kind of, I always have these reminders of, yeah, I should, record these games and play them back. And it kind of, one of the things I didn't really talk about before, but I talked about, like, basically I hadn't been playing Netrunner, but like I said, I also wasn't really out of Netrunner. I haven't been keeping up recently, but I've watched the majority of your early like reflections and coaching and all of that. I think there's only 5 of the successful demos that I haven't watched, and while I haven't had my own games to reflect on, I've kind of been reflecting on other people's games as they play them. And I think that definitely helped me a lot as well.
Yeah, I think that can be really useful when you're not in a place where you can be playing very much. Like, both times I had a baby, for the first month or so, I didn't have time to play much Netrunner, but I was sure watching a lot of Netrunner on YouTube, so kind of stayed in it.
Yep. This is like back to my kind of like my 5-turn analysis thing that my new insight is one of the things I do is I have the my build, which is a net deck, something like that, and it can allow you to draw, right? So sometimes what I'll do if I don't have access to JNet or I'm just like chilling, and I will actually just model my first 5 turns through like drawing, right? Like I'll draw this, and then I'm doing this, and then I'm doing this, and then I'm doing this. So the first 5-turn analysis is not just like reflecting on your first 5 turns, but it's also taking your deck and like just playing it even solo in a sense is what I'm doing on my phone.
Goldfishing.
Is that what it is? Is that what that is?
Yeah, to borrow a magic term. Yeah, it's referred to as goldfishing. You assume your opponent's just, kind of flopping around there on the other side of the table, not doing anything.
Magikarping, right?
Yeah.
I always thought it was go fishing.
No.
Goldfishing.
Well, that puts in a different connotation.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's
I've
like
done that too. The like on Netrunner DB, where it lets you draw a hand and then keep drawing cards. And you can even like click on them and it grays them out like you've played them. And...
Yeah, exactly. The most annoying is to like test like the max deck because I'm like draw, blackout.
Trash these 2.
Yeah.
And draw this one.
But yeah, that's
such a wild ride.
I love Max.
Oh yeah.
Anyways, that's all of my stuff. Like, do you guys questions, comments?
Yeah, we looked like we pulled the chat a little bit for questions, but it doesn't look like we have anything specific from anyone.
And we've been interrupting you plenty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do think it's
go
interesting
ahead.
sorry. I think getting a coach. So not if like you have a great meta in Baltimore, and I'm not saying Delaware doesn't have a great meta.
Dude, you guys are Ghost Branch. What are you talking about?
We all help each other.
It's the Ghost Branch, like.
We're getting better. It feels great, but like trying to figure out who to reach out to online. I know that Dan has asked some people for guidance. I know you were talking about it a moment ago, Kevin, where you're reaching out to people that live clear on the other side of the country. It's just everybody in the Netrunner community is friendly. The worst they can say is no.
The problem is most people don't say no. They just say like, yeah, let's try and make it work, right? No one's really good at saying no.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. No one is good at saying no because nobody wants to, like, everybody wants to help you be better, but it's it's hard.
But you'll certainly never get a yes if you don't ask.
Yeah.
So I think the best, so like I'm really lucky that I have Jonas and he's able to like come on, and I've also had like other guest people as coaches who want to join. Laura, I also still have a running one. I haven't re-asked you. I want to ask you to come on as well. Like she already knows this, but But
Yeah, I guess I was one of the, sure, yeah, let's do that. Oh, we actually never scheduled a time.
no, but you were actually followed up and said, "Hey, when are we going to do this thing?" Because you really wanted to do it, I thought. So, and we will do it. We will eventually do it. But
Okay.
I think the other piece here, which I highlighted as well in my new insight, was share your recorded games with a coach or trusted player. Like then they don't have to be there like in person, and they can provide you feedback. So like that's been a huge help to me where it's hard to watch a 30-minute game, right?
Mm-hmm.
So speeding it up to like 3x and having someone like look at it is really useful, and then providing you feedback that way. That's a way to do it where it's like a little bit less time for the person. And I think it's easier for people to commit to that.
I think that's one of the funny things about Ghost Branch, or the Ghost Branch, is if you go on JNet and you see one of us playing, if you look at the spectators, chances are
it's
one or
all
two
of the
of
rest
us
of us
is watching the other person play, and it happens all the time. We watch each other play more than we play each other, I think.
That's true, but how
definitely.
often do we give each other specific feedback afterwards?
Yeah, and
So we can be more
I think we're
intentional
getting
about
better
that.
at that. I think we
I
are
would
getting better.
say we do pretty regularly actually, or at least I'll make comments, in the chat afterwards, and Thomas will very clearly make, hey, yeah, I was watching that, and then this and this happened, and so with the very least we're commenting on it, even if we're not. I don't know.
We're
Maybe we could do more
commenting, but
we could do more
not,
active
yeah.
analysis. Yeah.
Maybe not as constructively commenting, more like, haha, that was a crazy game, or I don't know.
Oh, we love our crazy games, that's for
yeah.
sure.
So I think there's two things that you have to consider here, right? Is do you want to be in the comfort zone or do you want to be in the learning zone?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And sometimes like being in the comfort zone is totally okay. It's comfortable, it feels good, and it's fun, right? Like I feel really comfortable playing certain decks and just getting on late at night. I don't want to think too much and I just want to kind of jam a game, and I don't really care what happens. It's just Netrunner is such a fun game. Like deliberate practice is tough work and it's really hard, and it's not something I think you should even do all the time because it kind of kills the spirit of the game, to be honest. But the big but here is if you want to do better, you do need to have some sort of structure and systematic approach, I believe. And that's just kind of my thoughts on it.
Because doing well is really fun and feels really good.
It's true.
I don't know.
But
like
definitely.
the concept of playing Netrunner just for fun is good, but also a little foreign to me because winning is fun.
So I got a good example here where I think where Laura, you have done this well at times, right? So in Cache Refresh, you have the advantage of knowing what the other person is doing, right? So you have asked me saying, hey, I'm going to be playing such and such. It's an ag infusion. I don't know what it was. Like, I'm going to be playing this type of deck. Can you play against me, right? So I can get some practice. I think it was like the last one you asked me to do was like Ed Tech, right? The Asmari Ed Tech. You're like, I'm going to be playing against an Asmari Ed Tech deck. Can we play against it? And
you had an Ed Tech deck for that tournament, so.
Exactly. So I'm just like, yeah, sure, let's play. And that was a good example where that's, I think, the perfect opportunity to like play the match and then like talk about it afterwards. Right. And like you're clearly what you're trying to do is you're trying to practice for some, end goal. And I think you ended up winning that match. And like, I don't think you were favored in that match either.
No. And I have to play that same matchup again tomorrow night if you have any free time and want to help me practice. The next round of the cut is happening tomorrow night.
But that's an example where I think like as a team, like the Ghost Branch team, like you guys use each other as resources that way and say like, hey, I need to do this match, or like I want to play this, I want to understand this matchup. This is a real struggle for me.
Yeah. I mean, Dan just built the 419 deck that I ended up taking to King of Subways, and it was really, I enjoyed it, and it was, I was really impressed, and he really did, bring that together for me to play.
I'm glad it worked for you, because I tried testing that deck too, and it was all thumbs. I could not figure out how to get it to come together. So I'm glad you did well with it.
So I know we're approaching the end here of
Yes.
the cast. Like, so traditionally you guys have done homework,
Hmm.
and I don't have. So like I've talked about a lot of things
Yeah.
tonight. Is there something specific you guys were interested in?
Maybe it would be good for us each to individually pick what kind of our goal is for the next, like going forward. I think we're going to do this again in 1 week. So
Yeah.
what can we do in the next week if we want?
Could be we could do a follow-up in a few weeks too about this.
Yeah, that's
but
true.
I mean,
I know some of the things I want to take away. Like I wasn't planning on taking concrete homework away, but I know I have all this set up obviously to record my games. I'm recording this, so I should be doing that more often, and actually going back and analyzing what I'm doing wrong or what I'm doing right. Going into the King of Subways, I had a lot of self insight as onto why am I still playing Adam, and where should I be going from this. And I think I had some good thoughts on it, and I think doing this kind of practice, very deliberate practice with those decks, might have gotten me to where I'm at now a lot faster.
Anarch, man. It's basically like it feels like Adam.
Unfortunately, we could only play with the one Anarch, and
Oh,
Dan's max deck was really good.
Yeah.
So
It
Max
was.
is the best.
I mean, I'm kind of in the same bucket as Thomas. I've been sitting on recording gear for a while, as well as I'm sitting on a lot of different varieties of gear sitting behind me. But I mean, I can definitely at least do some recording, and at the very least have it recorded. And I know, that definitely changes people's mindsets on how they go through stuff, even before you start reviewing.
Hmm.
And I feel like I should probably do that. And Thomas, if we wanted to talk about zones, you could work on getting yourself in the comfort zone with slow decks. Get to the point where you feel like you know what's going on with them.
we'll see.
So I think like just one little suggestion for your guys' homework is I think what you should do is make like a commitment to record some games, and the key to it is speeding up. All honesty, like don't watch it in normal time because it's a waste of 20 to 30 minutes when you can watch it in like 4 to 10.
Yeah.
Right? And it's amazing. You can watch the game at like when I do my videos, I do them at like 2 to 3x, but I can watch them reasonably at 4 or 5x. Like you can process what's going on pretty easily, and then you're able to see that kind of macro level really well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And your memory will kind of fill some of those gaps in for you, especially if you're watching them back pretty recently. You go, oh, I missed a thing. Oh, but that was when, they resed the toll booth and I, bypassed it with Nexus. And, things will pop back into your brain that way, and it'll get you through.
Yep. So that's my suggestion is watch it faster. It's much easier to do.
That's a good suggestion, I think, because I'm sitting here thinking about recording and watching games and thinking, I don't have the time for that. I'd rather just be playing more Netrunner. But yeah, I think I will try watching it faster and see how that goes.
Yeah, like
I think that could be homework for, everybody, not just like us sitting here now, but everybody watching it too, because OBS is free. It runs on everything. You don't even have to stream it out to YouTube. You can save it as a file. And while, the video takes a little bit of effort, Gentechi's light enough that, any solid laptop these days, anything more than a tablet should be able to record what you're doing.
exactly.
I know a lot of times when I am on a stream, whether it's Dan's stream or sometimes I play on Metropole Grid or a couple other ones, I try to make sure I go back and watch that, and I definitely watch it at 2x.
Oh yeah.
On YouTube, so I can know what's going on. So no, it is important to do that. It's a good suggestion.
Cool. Well, so that's you guys are all committing to that.
Yes.
Yeah, look forward to getting all of our videos in the mail, Kevin.
Yeah, you volunteered to watch all of them, right? That's what I'm hearing.
And you want me to put like a, create like a little bulleted list of all of the misplays? Like maybe I'll create a little like document template of
Yeah.
how to analyze your games.
Sounds great.
But
Well, thank you again so
We'll
much.
call them your guys' your TPS reports.
Yes.
So you're going to tag them with bullet points.
Yes.
Let's go, Sprench.
Well, thank you guys for having me on here. This
No,
was great.
Thank you for doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a
thank
lot
you
of
for
fun.
sharing about, this topic that you've really put a lot of time into thinking through and writing about. And we're excited to have you as a permanent part of the show. We're kind of going to be, I guess, rotating through people. So not like 8 people every week, but
Yeah, we want to keep it to 4 basically, but
mhm.
we want to do it more regularly. So whoever's available, great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's exciting. I'm really excited to be a part of this. And what's interesting is the Delaware meta has kind of merged into the Philly / it's the Mid-Atlantic meta really is what it is. We all play in the same Storm Championships and regionals, so it feels like you guys are my playmates anyways, so.
Yeah,
do.
I'm even a lurker in your Slack group.
Wait, they have a Slack group?
Yeah, it's a public one. Well, we have 2. We have the Netrunner DC one, and then we have the Family Game Store one.
Nice.
You guys are welcome to those. It's good conversation.
Eventually, Delaware might actually move to Slack.
That's annoying, to be honest. That you guys are on Google Hangouts. Like I just never checked it, so it was like that was always my thing.
Yeah, we've been on that for like 2 years now. We just never moved off.
Yeah, well, not everyone in the Hangout uses Slack. Like Alan doesn't use Slack very much. So I don't know.
Yeah, I have it. It's there. It exists.
I use it more now that I uninstalled Facebook. The 2 are totally unrelated, but gotta get that social media fix.
So me, it's like we use it for work.
Yeah.
So like it's my primary communication tool at work. So it's as easy as like just hitting like command 1, command 2 to switch between the 2 different teams. So I'm always on there.
Makes sense. All right. Well, thank you very much again. I believe we're going to be back next week. Is that correct, Laura?
I believe so, because we have a new friend that we met at King of Subways, Talassen, and he wanted to join us for an episode, and he's in the US for another week, which makes time zone scheduling easier. So I believe next week on Tuesday, or I don't know what day it'll be, but next week
I'm pretty
sometime.
sure it'll be Tuesday again. I think we
Okay.
always want to do it on Tuesday.
Okay.
So it'll be great.
So yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more about King of Subways at that point, because it was great. It was so fun.
Yeah, and Russell, like he's actually been someone I've chatted with quite a bit about like, deliberate practice. So I think it's gonna be really exciting to have him on. He has some really good insights about, improving his play and making, becoming a better Netrunner player. And he's really taken to heart some of these like principles. So he'll be great.
Yeah, it was great. When we met him, it turns out he was our second biggest fan. So,
I'm number 1. Don't take it away.
I know. I'm not taking it away. You're the number 1 fan.
The best is when you guys came to like the store championships at Canton, the Myth and Moonshine one, the Mimosa one.
The first one last year.
The first one last year, and I was like, "What happened to NetrunnerQuest?" And you guys were all like,
Who is
"Oh,
No, that was great.
Russell did the same thing. He introduced himself to me, and I was like, "You know my name?"
Yeah, he's like,
Oh, right.
I recognize your voices. And it took me a
podcast.
while to figure it. It was like, great.
Yeah.
NetrunnerQuest lives." Yes.
Excellent.
Yay.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay,
So-
well, guess we got to sign out or whatever. What's
Yeah.
Yeah.
So who's gonna do it?
who's going to
Ken's
say?
not here this time.
I vote
Thomas or
Kevin.
Laura? I don't even know what he says.
What?
Whoa.
Okay, well, as the Adam
Always like is it
devotee,
like always be running or something like that.
It is.
Yes.
It is.
you lovely Netrunner people, keep running nets. Oh, I messed it up.
Always be
Okay.
Adam.
Always be Adam.
Hey, Laura, you take a stab at it, right? So Laura, are you gonna take a stab at it?
Oh, yeah, sure. Thank you for watching, everyone. Obviously, we're very professional and always be running.